All right, thank you guys all for coming. For those of you guys who do not know me, I'm Parker Lewis. I informally help organize events here at the Commons, work on a company called Zapright. Bitcoin Payments formerly was down the hall at Unchained working on Bitcoin collaborative custody, but thank you all for coming. Yeah. So tonight we're going to have a talk by Matthew Lysiak in his book, Fiat Food. If you haven't bought his book, there are copies there, and after Matthew gives a talk and does Q&A and then leads a panel, he will sign books for you, and I highly recommend. Last time I was at an event with him, I bought one for myself and 2 for my family. So buy his book. They're on the table there. I also have a book if you're interested in it. Graduate Themselves. We've got Crowd Health. Andy is here, right here, founder and CEO. Works out of the Commons. How many of you guys are Crowd Health members? Okay, not enough, but some good ones. I'm a Crowd Health member. If you are thinking that your insurance costs way too much and you don't get enough out of it, look into Crowd Health. It's actually been there for me personally. So appreciate what Andy does and appreciate Andy supporting the local Bitcoin community here too. Free Texas News, Sean Dunn, who is helping organize this event and do all the production and live streaming. So Sean, thank you, and thank the Free Texas News. And then Farm Road 369, the phenomenal food that Johnny Ochoa, Chef Johnny, Old Butch on Twitter. Let's give him a hand. Awesome for our secret weapon here and awesome for the Bitcoin community. He does events. So if you ever need anybody to cater, he's a champ. The food's phenomenal. And we just really appreciate having Johnny here, be part of our community and serving us great, clean beef and all the food that he does. So Johnny, thank you. And his company is Farm Road 369. We're going to do one announcement. If anybody else has an announcement, we'll do that. But after Matthew's talk, he's going to do Q&A. So we'll be going for about 20 to 30 minutes on the talk, and then we'll have Q&A so you guys will be able to answer questions. It will be on the contents of his great book, Fiat Food. And then after that, as I mentioned, Matthew will lead a panel with Cole Bolton of KNC Cattle, Texas Slim of the Beef Initiative. It was FAFO Farms? Okay, I don't know Clint. Oh, Clint. Well, great to meet you. And Clint from FAFO Farms. So that panel will follow.
At the Hippo Social Club up in Hutto. It's going to be a great event. As you'll see tonight, the intersection between Bitcoin and health is only getting more obvious. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. When we're on the Noster wave, of course, we will be promoting there as well, but we want to get this as big as possible. So yeah, really looking forward to it. If you have any
Okay, so it is October 26th, 2024, all right? So there's a 5K, 10K, and 21K race. Ooh. How many of you guys know who Hal is? Okay, how many of you don't? It's okay. All right, so Hal Finney was the first known person to join the Bitcoin network. Satoshi Nakamoto released the code and launched it, I think, on January 3rd, 2009. Hal Finney joined and received the first Bitcoin to join the network. He was a software developer in California. He was diagnosed 2 years later with ALS and passed away in 2014. Many people believe that he might be Satoshi, but he always maintained that he wasn't, and opened up his book while he was in the last years of his life to prove that he wasn't. But he made some great contributions to Bitcoin, and there's a whole organization that has been built up around Hal and ALS. So this trail run will support that. So it's going to be a great cause, good event, end of the month, October 26th. You guys should definitely look into it. So with that, Matthew, come on up.
Thank you. Stay in here. Thank you, Parker, for the kind words. I feel a little intimidated. Texas Slim is there, and it's like Parker Lewis and all these really great minds. How many of you were at the Sapien Center when I spoke last? Okay, great. I appreciate you coming back. I hope I don't sound too redundant. I'm going to have to go through a little bit of my backstory for those who don't know. So listening to some podcasts on the walk up here from my hotel, and I've been really excited how the degradation of our food supply has become a pretty hot topic recently, if you've all noticed. But I'm going to be very honest. I'm kind of like, it got me really worked up and kind of pissed off because a little bit frustrated over the tenor of the conversation. And I'll be excited that it's coming to light that something's wrong in our food supply, that these messages are becoming part of the mainstream. What's crushing me a bit is there's a lot of circular argument that is eventually just going to lead us back onto this treadmill of despair in terms of health. So I'm going to backtrack a bit here and tell you how I got into this personally, because I'm new to this world. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I was late to the game. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm an investigative reporter. Spent 10 years of my life at the New York Daily News, and I was a crime reporter. So my job was focused a lot on government corruption and mass shootings. So I was the national reporter. Anytime something broke around the country, I would parachute in. I had like a backpack in my car. I was that guy, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I transitioned for many reasons that would probably bore all of you into book writing. I was a mainstream journalist. I interviewed by Fox News and MSNBC and CNN, and I was in the New York Times and the Guardian. I was that guy. I was Apple TV made a show about my life, very sanitized, more about my kid's life. Fridge, my wife's there, food, and in it, Safedine posited what occurred to me as like a relatively insane theory, this conspiracy that this wacky religious group, corporate interests, and flawed nutrition science were sort of weaponized through fiat money printing to create a 50-year psyop that altered our food supply, made everybody sick. So I'm like, I love Safe's work, and I regard him. I honestly believe he's one of the top 5 economic minds in the world right now. I like some of his theories that he's had are revolutionary, and I could talk for 2 hours about some of the contributions Safe has had to the field of economics. But Safe is not an investigative reporter, and Safe is not a nutritionist, and Safe's an economist, an author. So I gave him benefit. I gave him the benefit of the doubt to the extent where I put my kind of reporter hat on. I began fact checking some of the assumptions and these allegations he was making in this chapter. And what I found was, if anything, Safedine had underplayed this theory. And my mind, it took me a while. We talked about it a lot, Bridget. It took me a while to really grasp these concepts about how these systems could be corrupted. And when I began peeling the layers back, what I discovered was what I would really legitimately say is the most consequential conspiracy in terms of the consequences on human life and health in the last 100 years. So essentially, we have been living in a 55-year psyop where our food system has been completely bastardized. And it wasn't for the health of the people. It was for the entrenched power structures. Now, I have between 20 and 30 minutes if your attention holds, so I want to briefly outline a few of those power structures. I tried to write this book linearly. I'm a reporter, and that was difficult because a lot of these power structures are incestuously enmeshed. But what I discovered was you have the church, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which was started in the late 1800s, early 1900s by somebody named Ellen G. White. And she's walking home from school one day. She gets hit in the head with a rock, goes into a coma, wakes up, and discovers that she's getting visions from God. And God says, Ellen, look, apocalypse is coming soon. You need to purify the people. And you do this by altering their diet to make them safe for heaven. And that's how they're going to get their key pass into that world. And how we do that is through restricting meat consumption. Because meat consumption at the time was believed to inspire masturbation and carnal desires. So this wasn't a crackpot theory in the early 1900s, late 1800s. This was really kind of mainstream theory. You have these ideas that all of these health maladies were the result of sexual desires, and in particular, young men pleasuring themselves. So she thought God told her, restrict the meat, and once you do this, you'll restrict the temptations, purify souls. You guys are all looking at me like, what the fuck does this have to do? But like, stay with me, please. I'm gonna get there. It's a messed up story. So Ellen hires a guy named John Harvey Kellogg. He's this young kid, and she takes him under his wing, and she tasks him and his brother with the job of altering breakfast for the American public. So at the time, late 1800s, early 1900s, people ate meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, if they could afford it. Johnny would be doing great business back then. And she needed to alter the food supply, basically come up with an anti-masturbatorial food that would repress. Yeah, you're laughing. I totally get it. It's fucking true. John Harvey Kellogg comes up with something called Kellogg's Corn Flakes. And shockingly, this becomes mainstreamed. All of a sudden, it does replace meat for breakfast. But John Harvey then is a falling out with the church. He discovers that Ellen White's a fraud. She's not a vegetarian. She was eating tons of fried chicken. A lot of these so-called vegans are eating tons of meat because they're human. That's what you do. But John Harvey Kellogg, his brother wanted to monetize it, add sugar. He was against it. So John Harvey Kellogg stayed in the same wheelhouse, became a eugenicist, was responsible for 3,100 women who were undesirable in Michigan through legislation he helped push through with funding to have their female reproductive organs removed. He was preceded by somebody named Lana Cooper, who started the American Dietetic Association. You guys are all like, how is he going to connect it all? It's happening. American Dietetic Association, in time, becomes the weaponization of the federal government's dietary food policy. That was the tip of the spear for diet in time. So you have this leg of the stool. You have this church, and they're pushing hard. At the same time, you have corporations who, even in the early 1900s, understood you make far more money selling plant-based products than you do meat. It's just, Texas is going to be up here later. It's hard to raise a cow. That's not easy. To do it right, to have meat, to get us that steak that Johnny's preparing so well for us, it's not easy. It's time intensive. Plants, they're not. And you can make them at scale. So as a result, the profit margin's bigger. So corporations have always been pushing. For example, Procter & Gamble, at the turn of the Industrial Revolution, was using cotton seeds to lubricate engine oils. But once it was no longer needed, they still had all these cotton seeds. So they were able to convince us, for the first time, shockingly, before 1950, people just really wanted to eat food. But post-1950, with Procter & Gamble and Crisco, they were able to convince, through a very sophisticated marketing campaign, us to eat cotton seeds and introduce that to the food system. Same with oleomargarine. There's a huge publicity push for margarine. When it first was introduced, there were riots in New York. People are like, what is this? This is not food. They were right. It was not food. But over time, we've become to accept these things. You also have corporations funding nutrition science pre-1970. So there was something called the Nutrition Foundation, which is always quoted in the New York Times. You go through the archives, they haven't Orwellian memory hold archives yet. They will. That's coming. But you could go through and see something called the Nutrition Foundation always popping up. It was completely industry sponsored, and it was always the authority back then for all these sciences that were saying, don't breastfeed, feed your kid Crisco, and all kinds of weird shit. It's super weird when you go back and you read it. Okay, so you have these two players. You have this religious group, you have the corporations, very influential. But come 1970, we're still eating breakfast of meat, lunch meat, dinner meat. We're still eating tons of meat. 1970, it's the Seventh-day Adventist Church has grown. Corporations have gotten more powerful. They've gotten us to eat some seed oils at this point. Crisco's become mainstreamed. We're still eating tons of meat. 1971 happens, August 15th. And President Richard Nixon is facing a crisis, okay? There's been a situation. We're in the Vietnam War, and before him was a man named Lyndon Johnson who started something called the Great Society. So we had been putting out so many of these paper notes that at the time could be redeemed for gold at $35 an ounce. The American public wasn't allowed to redeem their notes at this time for gold, but foreign banks could, which put a powerful restraint on spending. But what Nixon understood, and he understood it very well, was that we were committing a fraud. We had issued so many more paper notes than we had gold in our reserves. All it would have taken was one or two of these foreign countries to redeem them at the same time to expose this fraud. So he tells very few people. He has a secret meeting at Camp David and then a primetime announcement where he announces that we are going to go off the gold standard. Foreign banks can no longer redeem their notes for gold. And this changed everything because up until then, inflation happened because we were still printing more papers than gold that we had, but there was a restraint. Now, unchained. The fiat money printer becomes the most powerful weapon in the history of the world. I would argue that that's indisputable because through the fiat money printer and the inflationary theft that happens to the dollar through people's productive labor, post-1944 Bretton Woods, when almost the entire world accepts the dollar as their reserve currency for their specific currency that was then pegged to our gold, we were able to weaponize not just the American labor force, but that of the entire world. However, there's a problem. And I filed over 200 FOIA requests. I dove so hard into this, it would bore you if I even touched your eyes would glaze over if I try to explain to you the level of research it took to get to this seed. But the government under Nixon was extremely perceptive in the sense that they knew that food was going to escalate. And historically, a population will tolerate government corruption. They'll tolerate war. When food prices go up too high, people freak the fuck out. Look at Sri Lanka, 2022. Meat, eggs went up, skyrocketed, so did energy, but the food rise was attributed, hundreds of thousands of people stormed the palace, and the leaders had to flee. Or look at, it was Washington, D.C.-based American University had a study out that said in 2022, there were 12,500 food-related protests and riots in Europe alone, just in 2022. My point is, governments are very well aware of the correlation between rising food prices and instability. They want to maintain power. So when Nixon did this, they knew what was happening. And he appointed a guy named Earl Butz as Department of Agriculture. And that man was tasked with consolidating our food supply through farming. And I know Slim could talk about this more. He began funneling through the fiat money printer $1 bazillion in corn subsidies, soy subsidies, and sugar subsidies through a more roundabout way, but definitely corn and soy. And where in the past, under a gold standard, if you want to pour tons of money into something, you need the consent of the people, because same with war, right? Like Fiat was invented because in World War I, the people in London and England didn't want war. But the leaders did. They wanted war. You didn't want another conflict in Europe. The people, it didn't feel like it affected them. So they got a young man named John Maynard Keynes, who came up with a justification that sounded really fancy. We all know it now as Keynesianism, which if you want to lower your IQ, go to a community college Keynesian professor and just have them explain to you how money printing raises economic GDP into growth, and you'll come out dumber, I guarantee it. But they began pouring all this money into these subsidies that no longer had to have the consent of the American public. They began incentivizing loans to large farmers to weed out small farmers. And I would love to hear your perspective on this when we do the panel text. And as a result, Earl Butz had a slogan he was famous for saying, and it was, "Go big or go home." Because they understood that changing the food supply was the only way to obscure the theft of monetary inflation through money printing. They understood this. I have this in writing from them in emails, wasn't emails at the time, through memos from the different departments. They outlined this strategy. And what you see starting in 1971 is, at that point, they begin weaponizing the church. They begin weaponizing industry. They begin taking these institutions and their incentives that already existed pre-1970 and putting them on steroids. So now, where Loma Linda University, which is run by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is constantly pushing these studies that talk about meat is killing everybody, well, those studies are I don't want to get into too many weeds. They're observational studies, so they can't establish causal relationships. They can only establish association. And they're funded literally by the religious organization. And it's kind of like you could use observational studies. I could pull everybody in here and say, how many people have ever had a cold? How many people have ever had milk? And then I could be like, oh, 92% of people have had milk and a cold. So that spurs a news article, milk linked to flu virus. And they call that science today. It's not. It's religious doctrine when it comes from Loma Linda University, who post-Fiat is now getting hundreds of millions of dollars in Fiat-produced grant money. So that's weaponized. Then you have the incentives of corporations who began capturing government agencies after this. So our dietary food pyramid comes out in 1980. First, it was really interesting. Pre-1980, like our grandparents, nobody told them what to eat. They'd regard it as insane that the government had it. Like nobody would tell a lion what to eat, right? It's crazy. 1980 comes out. Suddenly, eat less meat, eat more grains. 1992 comes out, the food pyramid. I'm older than a lot of people here. Grew up in that period, 1992. It's like, people remember it was in every shop, every hoagie shop, every pizza place. Dude, right? Like, it was healthy. They recommended, do you remember how many grains they recommended? It was like 11 to 12 or something. 8 to 11. 8 to 11 servings of grains a day. So they're recommending what is obviously like a recipe for metabolic destruction. So the government, because of their need to keep us controlled, to make it harder to understand the theft that is happening through Fiat, had to alter the food supply. They had no choice. I could even point to pre-1970 how this began when the inflation started creeping up because we were printing more dollars. Some of you might already know this story, but I just can't say it enough. Lyndon Johnson was considering re-election. Price of eggs were skyrocketing because the Great Society, we have all these paper notes out, and we don't have the gold to back it up. Nixon's going to have to pay the price for that. But he called his Surgeon General into his office. And this is according to a member of his administration named Samuelson, who wrote a book and outlined what happened. And he said LBJ sat the Surgeon General down and was like, look, eggs are going up in price. We have to do something. And the Surgeon General's like, yeah, it's not my wheel. I don't know what to do. And he's like, send out a press release saying eggs are bad. They're unhealthy for people. That will change supply. That will change demand. Supply stays the same. As a result, eggs go down in price. It worked. People to this day believe that press release. Pre-1970, a guy named Ansel Keys was kind of considered a joke by a lot of mainstream scientists. There's a guy named John Yudkin who worked in England who had a lot more prestige and had some different ideas. Ansel Keys posited this idea that saturated fat found in meat raised cholesterol, which caused heart ailments. It was bullshit. We all were taught this in school. It was all observational studies to justify this theory that was never proven. However, they did attempt one clinical trial called the Minnesota Coronary Survey in 1968 this was going to really prove Ansel Keys' diet hypothesis that meat was bad for people. 4 years done in Minnesota, 4 Minnesota institutions that could control variables. So these were people who were in nursing homes and mental institutions. All the variables could be controlled in terms of diet. And 1972 rolls around, the study's over. There's no release of what happened. Nobody found out. 2006 comes, and I did some work with the New York Times, so I hate giving them credit, but they did some good work on this. They had somebody find out, like, what happened to that study from 1972? We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in government grants. Well, they were able to track down, one of the lead authors had died at the time, but his son in a basement had the papers of the study, and they went through it, and they were shocked. What they found out was that low cholesterol was actually associated with worse health outcomes. And high cholesterol was associated with better health outcomes, the exact opposite of what Ansel Keys had posited. And Gary Taubes, who's a great science journalist and has been, I'm clocked down. All right, I'm wrapping up. Gary Taubes got a hold of one of these people who was doing this investigation and asked, why didn't you release this to the public? And the answer was very telling. He said, there was nothing wrong with the science. The study was really good. Quote, we were just so disappointed in the results. That's what we're facing. And I guess I'm pissed off a bit because I'm so glad that the food and the degradation of our food supply is being brought to the mainstream. But what we're doing is we're laying the patient on the table and we're looking at the patient and we're saying, you're fat, you're sick, the food is awful, it's a problem, but we're not getting to the root cause. And until we get to the root cause, which is, make no mistake about it, I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I've become a Bitcoin guy. I don't have a dog in this race, but I'm an investigative reporter, and I'm telling you, if you dig into these facts, the root cause of our dietary plague that's affecting all of us isn't the greed of corporations. That incentive existed long before we got sick. And it's the need to preserve the fiat money printer. If you remove the incentive to obscure the rising degradation of our money, there's no reason the government would do this. There's no reason the table would sway. You pull out all the incentives. 3 minutes. Ish. I'll wrap it up. And I know it sounds like a lot. I wrote a book on this. You know, I bring the receipts. I knew what this argument would sound like, so I really go through meticulously to over 200 notes to citations. How does Bitcoin solve the food? Like, One of those fucking crazy people who say Bitcoin solves everything. No, Bitcoin in and of itself doesn't solve the food. What Bitcoin does is it crushes the Federal Reserve, which it does, which ends the need. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I know this sounds nuts, not to you guys, but when I go do more mainstream podcasts, I have to really dig in on this. But when you end the Federal Reserve, you end the need to not only to store the food, but the architecture, all these this fucking matrix that we've been living in. It crushes it. And then Bitcoin is a tool to reassert reality, to bring it back. And I feel, I mean, that's why I'm getting kind of pissed off at watching all these people talking about the distortions in our health without getting to the root core. And they're doing great work. I'm not shitting on them. Like, I'm kind of shitting on them. I don't think they get it. They come from like the people who have taken this argument over. But it's just going to continue the same until we end the Federal Reserve. And I know that sounds so hard to do, but I talked to so many of you in here, like Andy with Crowd Health, and a lot of the people I've spoken to are developing these little ways to make Bitcoin more accessible, Bitcoin easier, Bitcoin more mainstream. And that I contend that buying Bitcoin is the most charitable act any of us could ever commit, because every time we take the fiat and we put it into the Bitcoin, we take a jab at the Federal Reserve, just a little one. The more of us that do it, we're going to build a critical mass. And in time, like, we're winning. We're going to win this. I'm convinced. And then, I mean, I think that reality reasserts itself, and we're fucking calling Texas Slim and Johnny, and we're like, we want more steak. It's more affordable, by the way, because the subsidies that go into the corn. Why are we drinking corn? Like, why are we putting corn on our pancakes? What the fuck, right? It's weird. Oh, it's subsidized. It's cheap. You can, if you're only eating Doritos, you don't notice inflation. We have 4 daughters. If I'm feeding them cereal, it looks like the dollar's going well. It looks like, man, food's affordable. But the nutrients for our survival, for us to thrive, has become cost prohibitive, and it's becoming to the point where only the upper classes are going to be able to afford meat. And where does that leave us? Buy fucking Bitcoin, end the Fed, eat meat. That's it. I got the time. Thank you. I apologize if I'm a bit rambly. I mean, it's just. Any questions?
Yeah, we're going to do a quick Q&A. I'm just going to reset in the background. Is this thing on? Who's running this out? Over here. Check. All right. So we're going to do... Can that travel? Yes, that can travel. So you can do this, and then you can step to the front of this, and I'm just going to reset some stuff behind you. So anybody's got questions for Matthew?
All right, first question.
We'll do another Q&A with the panel afterwards also.
So first I want to thank you, because most of the things that you've said I've heard before, from the Seventh-day Adventist Church stuff all the way through Lyndon B. Johnson, but I'd never put them together into a single cohesive story, so thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing I want to thank you for is that I think that, like, you're probably the first person I've seen that's really excited about this idea, well, not excited, but like, you know, impassioned about this idea that the Fed, I don't think you said it directly, but you implied it, is stealing from the poor to give to the rich. When do you think that will become more of a mainstream conversation?
God, I just don't. First, thank you, really. I appreciate that. This is a passion project for me. When I wrote this, I had no idea people would buy it. It's being translated in 4 languages now. The sales are through the. I'm shocked. I'm going to be doing Tucker Carlson next month. I was doing Del. I'm here to do Del Bigtree. I did that yesterday. He's a great man. So I'm just very. I didn't expect it to get this, but I guess how I would answer that is, I think it's already happening. I think people are already starting to see that something's, just like we're seeing that something's really, really wrong with our food supply. I think that people are starting to see that the financial system's rigged. I mean, like we my wife and I spent our formidable years in Brooklyn, and we paid me really well at the Daily News. I mean, I couldn't afford a house. Like, what? I'm getting paid 90 grand a year from the Daily News. That was 90,000 in 2015, right? So I just think that the first step is self-autonomy, and you can't be healthy, you can't see clearly when you're on a diet of Fruit Loops and like cereal bars, right? So I think the first step is to just get well. I think health presupposes self-autonomy, and the healthier we get, I wish more of the people who are speaking out about the degradation of our health would talk to Slim and talk to some of these other people who are on the front lines and have been doing it for years and understand the incentive process. And only once that's switched and what's at the heart of it. I don't think I did a great job of answering your question, because I actually not really, I don't know. I'm just hopeful that I have a lot of faith in people. I do. But thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. I'm curious if you've done research. So if I start eating seed oil stuff, my body's going to want to reject that. So in the history, the government overrides my body's kind of like wisdom by their propaganda. And then there's, I think, also like a story arc of mixing in addictive things with like seed oil poison. Do you have thoughts on sort of that arc? The arc of the science kind of like making the poison food more addictive?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts. These corporations have always been, they're beholden to their shareholders, right? So it's like they need to make a profit. And this was like this pre-1970, but they have these scientists are coming up with these additives. I think about myself, because I was a kid in the 90s who grew up under the dietary food pyramid. So it was law at that time that I had to eat shit at lunch through the public school system. It's illegal to sell whole milk. Michelle Obama brags about this as her biggest accomplishment, is getting whole milk out of school lunches, replaced by low-fat milk, tasted like ass, so they had to infuse it with strawberry and chocolate. By the time I come out of high school, I'm metabolically compromised. I got cancer when I was like 15, and I asked my doctor, I remember being like, why did I get this? Like, what happened? What did I do? And he said, well, we don't know why people get cancer. But I was fat, and I was eating tons of this shit. So when I became an investigative reporter, my specialty was crime, but I was always on the front of my mind, like health, like what happened. I tried veganism for a while. That feels great for about 7 days. And then your energy drops, and you go to pick something up, and you fall over because you're dizzy. It doesn't work. I find that if you buy some steaks from Texas or some food from Chef Johnny, that you're satiated, and the cure is just to start with meat. Nina Teicholz told me that. It was a great advice. I have trouble. I'm addicted, right? So you come out addicted. I'm addicted to this shit, and I eat a steak every morning, and I'm fortunate that I can afford that. But then it helps with the cravings. Yeah, thank you.
Question? Ollie?
Matthew, thank you. That narrative that you drew together was so succinct, and it was beautiful, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
When you have conversations like you did today with normies, at what point do you recognize their eyes glaze over? And what approach can we take? What specific strategy can we take to hook them back in again to this conversation?
I guess what works for me is I always tell them, I don't trust. My daughter, I have one daughter who has trouble with this, and we're really working on it. I have a lot of compassion for her right now. My Hildy, she's a great kid. She's 17, and it's, we fed her wrong. My wife and I fed her. We didn't handle it completely right for years. We didn't know. Just give it. I always tell people, don't listen to me. Just give it 10 days. Try 10 days where you're just going to eat animal-based foods and just see what your body tells you. That's the thing that caught me. I mean, I feel so fortunate and in debt to Seyfedin Ammous
for that chapter, because I never would have gone out and bought a book on health. He slipped it in to a book on currency. And it changed my life. And my wife, every now and then, she'll say to me, I'm just so glad that, like, you know, you're doing this. And I've written TV scripts that have sold. I've written 9 different books through major publishing houses, thousands of magazine articles, it seems. There's nothing I've ever done that I'm more proud of than this. And when I'm gone, I want my grandkids to be reading Fiat Food. And I hope it's still there. And I just think that I speak to my daughter like I speak to anybody else. I always bring it up. I'm like, just try it. Don't believe. It's in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. Buy some steaks from Tex. It's slim.
Yep. So you've got like these travel influencers going to Europe and noticing that like they eat the same food, but they lose a lot of weight. But Europe is also arguably very fiat, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think is the difference there between European food and American food?
That's a great question. 2 things. The first one is a lot of the things that they eat are banned here. A lot of the things that we eat are banned there. A lot of the chemicals. I mean, it's like we're okay with putting toxins in our foods. They're like a little more weary of it. But the main thing is very simple. It's time. We are always in America at the forefront of this, and we're spreading it. But slowly, you find in Italy. We were in Italy in 2019. In Italy in 2019. It's changing. And in a matter of time, the more they adapt our lifestyle, eventually the Maasai in Africa, you're going to see McDonald's down there. Right now, they're the healthiest people on earth. You know, they have no cancer. They have no heart disease. What do they eat? They just eat meat. They drink some blood. They drink milk. Once in a while, they'll find some honey. That's it. They have no disease. Nothing. But eventually, in time, I'm convinced that if we don't reverse the incentive structure, blaming corporations is easy. I mean, and they're shit. They're just following the incentives. Like, nothing will ever change. They're always going to try to make a profit. But change the incentives, end fiat, end the Federal Reserves, all these perverse incentives. Why do we put corn in our Coke here, but you go across the border in Mexico and it's cane sugar? It's because the government hates us.
And we export that.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do 2 more. One here and then one back there.
So you mentioned in the last question, the incentives are perverse. And you talk a lot about how the incentives are perverse in our food supply. Is there another topic that interests you that you're looking at maybe as the next frontier for you to investigate?
Where the fuck is Andy? Andy? Did Andy leave? Andy from Crowd Health. Fiat medicine. Did you know this? Are you setting me up for a softball here?
No,
Yeah.
just-
I think it's really intertwined with the food system is the corruption in medicine. Now, the corruption in medicine isn't as fiat currency driven, although there are elements of that. Fiat by decree. And my God, like, my wife was like telling me about this stuff long ago, and I thought she was insane. And now I'm looking into Rockefeller's influence, the Flexner report, and it's dark. Like, you know, it's been some of the I've covered. You know, I wrote a book on Sandy Hook for Simon & Schuster. Talk about dark. This is on that level of just when you find out how the government really feels about the American public and the experiments that they've had. And RFK Jr. is doing amazing work on this. If anybody's read The Real Anthony Fauci, it's not just about Anthony Fauci. It kind of goes through a history of the weaponization of the medical industrial complex, and it's fascinating. He's a really great reporter. Doesn't get enough credit for his reporting skills. Or if he has somebody working for him, whoever that person is doing it. It's amazing. But yeah, medicine.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
All right, we got one more, and then we'll have more of Matthew, but on a panel.
Everybody's
How
like,
could we use Bitcoin to incentivize like local farming, opposing to farming and grocery store? I think the true issue is we're dependent on the grocery store, which is where most of the poisoning happens, right? So if we can use Bitcoin to incentivize a different way of people, creating markets like we used to, because coming from the islands, we used to go to the market. We didn't depend on the grocery store.
Where do you come from?
Jamaica.
Nice. Okay.
And when I would come here, a lot of the fruits that are healing fruits like soursop and all these other natural fruits that we eat, they won't let that cross the border. They say we're bringing in bugs, but we really know it's not true. We know that's to control the marketplace and what we eat. And so it's like when you're eating soursop and all these different fruits, like people are losing weight and cancer is being, is not prevalent as it is here. And a lot of these fruits, you don't see them here. So how could we use Bitcoin to more incentivize community marketplaces and farmers, opposing to us depending on the grocery store where we're truly getting the poisoning?
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How have you noticed how the food in Jamaica has shifted? Is that
Absolutely. They're putting in KFC and fast food, and the mindset of the people are going to shambles. I've noticed that, and it's all economically driven through, I'd say the British economy to control people's mind, because back then, the Jamaicans were usually more rebellious and they didn't really follow the system. But now that the food is shifting, the mindset of the people are shifting as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's just not in my wheelhouse of expertise, and I feel I'd just be blowing smoke up your ass to answer. Can I defer that to Texas Slim when we get on the panel? So remember, thank you. So I'm not trying to evade you. I really don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good transition point to the panel, because both Cole and Slim and Clint will be able to talk to that. Cole raises beef in East Austin. Clint has his own farm. He'll talk about it. Hometown meat markets in Luling, you can buy directly from there and ship to your house, local, raised and processed. And I think on the Bitcoin side, from my perspective, we're working on Bitcoin payments. It's like, Cole made a very forward thing to start selling his beef for Bitcoin. And just the more people that do that, because I think, what Matthew was talking about, but not only do they debase our food, they control access to the financial system through permissions in the fiat system. Bitcoin allows you to go directly to your customers and not be cut off from a permission financial system. And so just the more people that organically support and say, you can pay me in Bitcoin, will help drive that adoption. Before we get to the panel, I forgot to mention Alan Bickerstaff and DLA Piper. I apologize. They are great patrons of Austin Bitcoin Club. They're a law firm here in town. Any entrepreneur thinking about starting a business, whether you're a Bitcoin company or not, reach out to Alan. He's an active member of the community. I know people who've worked with him and have had a great experience and value his advice and his work product. So we need more people starting businesses. And when you do, think about Alan and look up DLA Piper. So with that, we're going to go to the panel.
Yeah, so we've got a couple quick videos that Slim asked me to share. So we'll show those videos, just under 8 minutes on those.
You want to expand it?
Yeah, I'll make that a little bit better. Hopefully the audio works. I did this last second on the fly, so I think the audio is going to come in. So we'll play these at the end of the second video, though. We'll have the panel come up, and Matthew will lead a discussion with Texas Slim, Cole Bolton, and Clint from FAFO Farms. And which, by the way, I get my beef from KNC. Thank you, Cole. And I get my milk and eggs from Clint, so I'm glad he's able to be here and represent. So, all right, I'm going to play these, and then at the end of these, we'll have these guys come up. Didn't get to test this. We'll see here.
Is the heartland of America, the backbone of the American beef economy. We're here.
The wildfires burning out of control in the Texas Panhandle.
Viewers may find these images disturbing.
The wildfires took everything we had.
I see the destruction and the devastation everywhere.
Thousands of livestock have been lost and hundreds of homes and other structures decimated.
I've never seen a fire like this.
Lots of cattle lost.
All of this place burned.
With well over 1 million acres turned to ash.
It got so big and the wind got so high that it scattered everybody out.
The flames were probably 15 feet tall.
Oh my gosh. Probably the meanest fire I've ever fought. It looked like somebody throwing big old red balls, just throwing them out there. It'd land out there and light off again. You fought what you could, where you could knock it out. And whenever, if you're not paying attention, it circle around behind you and cover you up.
Surrounded by flames, authorities tonight saying there are no exits out.
We had no air support. I don't know where the air support was.
Hey man, 4 5 trucks. We can't hold it.
Get out of there.
Let's pull out. We got too many spots.
You were on your own.
This hay hauler said he'd went out north of Canadian to deliver hay and went to this old man's house, and he had 450 mama cows. And he said, "Sir, how many bales of hay is it going to take to get you through?" And he said, "Son, I don't need any hay." He said, "I've got 1 cow left." Can you imagine?
A lot of cattle died in the fire.
It came so hard, so fast. Most of them weren't able to get away from it.
Most of them die of smoke inhalation. They'll run and run and run from it until they can't, and they just die of smoke inhalation. You can follow the fire line and see they'll all start giving up at the same time, and they'll just start scattering. They'll be in a line where they're starting to give up, or they'll get to a corner, and it'll all catch them in the corner.
I've never seen so many dead cattle, dead animals.
5,000, 10,000. It's really hard to say right now, but it's going to be pretty dramatic.
A lot of the cattle were already bloated and burnt and dead. But then I had cattle that didn't have hair, didn't have the ears, lips, eyelids, all burnt off. And they were still walking and they come into the feed truck. And that's the hard part of ranching, having to get out with your rifle and shoot your own cattle. I had nightmares for weeks.
I have a really good friend of mine that called me one day and said, "I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore." But it has to be done. And so it was the first round of it for my boys, and it didn't take them long to get sick of it. People here have a lot of grit and a lot of fight in them, but you can see it in their eyes, behind their smile. They're tired of looking at it, they're tired of talking about it, and they're tired of thinking about it.
A lot of the ranchers are getting up there in age.
I'm 93 last December.
At that age, would you start over?
I've never thought about quitting or giving up. Cows need fed or they need looked after. I always have a reason to get up the next morning. I think everybody needs something to get up for the next day.
As of today, all the fires are out, but that means work begins. It's going to take months to years to get back on our feet.
This was my living, and it's shattered.
These are our friends and neighbors. If we don't help, who will?
You feel bad for people driving 6 hours with a load of hay, because they've got family they need to be with.
That is hard. It's really hard.
I had a guy from Decatur, Texas, come in. He got here around 9:30 that morning, and we unloaded, and he said, I'll see you this evening. And I said, "You what now?" He said, "I'm driving back to Decatur, Texas and getting another load, and I'll be back this evening." And I thought, how amazing somebody would do that.
If we don't, who will? Because they're not coming for us. We got to take care of ourselves.
When it came to my place, I'd help my neighbors till I had to leave. And it was me and one guy at my house. Todd Keith, if it wasn't for him, I'd have lost everything I had.
We got to stick together. This is what ranchers do. This is what farmers do. This is what Texas does.
Neighbors helping neighbors, it's just unbelievable. But that only goes so far. When it's gone, we have to sell everything we have. And if we don't have cattle out here, we can't feed the world. This world lives on what we raise.
There is lots of good people out there. I found that out. I was really kind of down on humanity. I thought, this world's going downhill. But after this, there's more good that came out of this than the bad.
We just can't give in. We can't let up.
I've had losses, but my heart's broke more for my neighbors than it is me.
I think I'm gonna need new tires on the truck before I can come back. But if that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
This fire has been one of the worst things that I've ever experienced in nature. And the kindness of people is some of the best I've ever seen in humankind.
My neighbor came to me and said, "I'm here to help you." And I said, "Get out of here. This fire's bad." He said, "I got it." He crawled on the front of my truck. He said, "You didn't leave me. I'm not leaving you. We're here."
Hey guys, Texas Slim.
Has lost thousands of farms in just a few years.
141,000 farms have disappeared in just 5 years, with over 20 million acres of farmland lost.
Hey guys, Texas Slim. All right, so how about we, Matthew, where are you? Come on up. Let me see. Nick, can you go put the light back up? If you just click the up arrow. Yeah, up arrow a couple times. There you go. All right, so bring Matthew up to lead the panel. We've got Texas Slim from the Beef Initiative, Cole Bolton from K&C Cattle, and then Clint from FAFO Farms. Bring them all up. And one thing I'll just say, I had a great pleasure of meeting Slim 3 years ago, and then meeting Cole through Slim, and I had already interacted here in Austin with some guys that were on the carnivore diet. But one of the things that Matthew said, like, I changed my, the whole way that I ate, and people around me thought I was crazy. And, I told them things like, these vegetables are bad for you, and they think that, like, literally I was nuts. And I just went and got, calcium score done, and it was 0. Been eating basically only beef, and pretty much, not only, but, high percentage. And it just shows you that, and the thing that Matthew said was, if you try this for 10 days, just like see how your body feels, because that's what I did. I was like, this makes a lot more sense. And so I just, one of the things that I want to say about, the broader economic system is there's a lot of fragility. There's a few things that are important. Community, literally people with good heads on your shoulder around you, and people like this that are actually helping, and also Matthew, spreading the word, and the education is a big part of it. But these guys that are on the ground helping get us the things that actually serve our bodies and our health and the fuel. And there's a few things that I learned from Slim, a lot of things, but a few things. Shake your rancher's hand. If you haven't done it, do it, and you won't regret it. And the other thing is to change your consumption model, because that's the hardest thing. It's like the grocery store is right there. It's easier to do. It might be a little harder to go on the website, buy, but Cole has the best beef in town, and it's sold at Hometown Meats. So change your consumption model and go shake your rancher's hand. And with that, Just think about this as you listen to these guys and be thinking about how you can change your lives and the lives around you for the better, and that you need to do it now because the future is at risk.
Thank you.
You're the red mic. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you for that video. That was great.
The reason that video, the documentary, is somebody that has put that together. That was Lee Wells. He's a rancher down south of Dallas. The rest of the video is basically 4 years of content that we put together that we actually kicked off here in Austin 4 years ago, 2021, and then we went into basically 2022 into Kerrville to our first conference. And so Parker Lewis told me, he goes, hey, whenever you're doing all these conferences and whatever you can, you record audio and record video. And so I followed Parker's advice. He's kind of a smart guy. So it's been 4 years. We've done a lot, and now we're going to go show the world what we've accomplished, because even Cole and I were talking 4 years ago. We said there's a perfect storm coming. That perfect storm is, I think, what everybody's seeing right now within food, within money. There's a general awareness it's about to there's a wave coming, so we're ready for it. And we're going to show everybody what we've done so they can have market access, entry points into this lifestyle. And it's sound money, sound food, and it's sound communications. And what we've done with that last video, we have a mapping system. I've been around the world like twice. And so in the beginning, we wanted to give people market access and visibility into truth in food. And so for about 2 years now, we've been working on a mapping system to where you'll be able to pop up your phone, basically be driving anywhere in the United States, and you will be able to find the local producer rancher that's come through the beef initiative. We're starting with beef, but we're going to go into stuff like what Clint's doing. We're going to go into raw milk. We're going to go into like Jason Rick of Rick Ranches. He has an Airbnb now. You're going to be able to find these farms and ranches anywhere in the United States without a bunch of basically searchability. It's just going to be there. We have over 250 ranchers and producers that have come into the beef initiative holistically because they heard the word of mouth basically approach that we did the beef initiative. It's grassroots. We've been on the ground for 4 years. We've got a lot of stories to tell. We've got a lot of producers to produce into the mindsets of America now. So that's what you're about to see.
Dude, sounds great, man. I've known about you for a while, right? Safe mentioned you in a conversation. I looked you up, and the work you do is fantastic. You all talk about the association between freedom and beef, and like freedom and raw milk, and how the two are intertwined. Like Clint, how do you see it? Like, what is that? What is that connection exactly?
It's about creating an alternate healthy choice that you can consume your own food, but we're already seeing with how the government is trying to regulate even just raw milk. Right now, I mean, there's currently still one state where it's illegal to even own raw milk, and that's in New Jersey.
Do you feel the momentum is shifting, though, towards you?
I do see it shifting towards us, especially with RFK Jr. and his advancement into making America healthy again. Thomas Massey, he's doing a new big movement on raw milk, and just several other politicians in Congress that have kind of opened up the eyes to a lot of the corruption that we're seeing in our food industry.
So I'm gonna kind of like one of the questions I was asked. It really strikes me in your industry is you're facing so much opposition. In the 1940s it was don't eat red meat. Don't drink raw milk because we need to save it for the troops to keep them strong. And then it shifted to meat is too resource intensive. And because the population's growing so much, we need to eat grains. And now it's a thermostat for the weather, right? Like don't eat meat because you're going to change the weather. Educationally though, how do you combat that?
Well, you talk to people like this man right here. Okay, whenever I come from West Texas, that's the belly of the beast of the cabal system, the multinational system. 85% of our protein in the United States of America is controlled by 4 multinational corporations. Put that to perspective. And so whenever you go out and you challenge the cattle industry as we know it, you have to surround yourself with a lot of good people. So Bolton was the second person that I went out there and shook hands with and proposed, what I wanted to try to accomplish. And Cole accepted my handshake, but what I found out is he's probably one of the smartest cattlemen in the United States. So let's start talking to the cattleman that is actually innovating into this new food space, and Cole's been the leader of that.
Cole, how do we preserve you? I mean, like, you're facing a tidal wave, and you don't need me to tell you this, a mass tidal wave of momentum against you.
How to put that in words? So it's kind of like if I walked in here and I said, well, all of y'all are a bunch of wacky ass Bitcoiners. You should support the Fed. And if someone mentioned that, I'm pretty sure that about half of you, actually probably everyone in here, might turn around and give the middle finger, I'm guessing. It's kind of the same way. The old Western lifestyle and the way in which we were raised and ingrained is kind of the old military idea of don't tread on me. And the more you push, the more I'm going to be resilient. Our community, as you saw in the video, even in the Panhandle, we were shipping hay. We were taking feed from South Texas, North Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas. We band together and we're really, really close, but it's a way of life. And there are a lot of young people, and that's one of my newest goals along with education, is to make sure that, right now the average age of a rancher is 65 years old. And so when you let that sink in and you look at population age and how that shifted, young people don't want to get into an industry where they're constantly getting their ass kicked and they're making no money. That's why I started what I did, because that's all I ever wanted to do. I jumped into the banking sector because I needed fiat, right? I needed a way to provide. But more importantly, in ranching and agriculture, Clint and I were talking about this a while ago about a lease place. The capital requirements to grow, to be able to serve enough to make an income are so high. And I really want to help bridge that gap with other producers and consumers, because you ought to be able to make a living and do what we do. And I was hell-bent to prove it wrong. And now I figured out a way in which I can help, hopefully, other people see that. And we all continue to work together. The Bitcoin community is great about supporting its own. Always has been. It helped change my whole business model. Just the same, whether you're grass-fed or all natural, or you pick what side of your program you want on beef, or you raise chicken or pork or dairy product. If we will join forces and not fight each other and actually fight the corporate machine and get more people to understand the importance of eating local foods and knowing where it comes from, that's how we're going to change. So you ask how you can clone me, you can't, but you can help replicate more and more young people that want to get in this. They just need direction on where the entry point is.
And that's a good point. As far as the generational gap, we have the old school guys trying to talk everybody out of becoming ranching. Why is that? Well, it's the Fiat system. And you brought that up. I came up during the 70s. I was a child that grew up with a freezer full of beef in the Texas Panhandle. That's what I know, and that's what we knew back then. But you can look at, everything that you brought up is, what happened in 71. But, that is a very real shift that happened in money. It happened in food, too, man. I grew up drinking Tang. Think about that. And TV dinners that were tasted like ass. Really, microwaves that first came out. We had sizzling. What's sizzling, right? Does anybody know what sizzling is? It is the byproducts of turkeys that they turn into bacon. And so what it was a monetary shift, went into a debt economy. Well, that shifted the food. We went into subsidization of our consumption. And so that hit farming and ranching big. And, you know, you go big or go home. How much does a combine cost right now? You know, we talk about money and everything. A used combine right now, $700,000. Before I started the beef initiative, I went and embedded myself into a harvest company. We had 7 harvesters. Okay, everything that we did was rented, nothing was owned. The only person that owned anything in the whole facilitation of that harvest was the landowner. Somebody else came in and planted the seed. Somebody else owned the seed. Somebody else came in and did the herbicide. Somebody else came and did the pesticide. So you look at what we've done in agriculture, what we've done in poultry, what we've done in hog, and what we've done in beef. The reason the cattle industry has always been so robust is because they're majestic beings. They're different. They need stewardship, right? They need stewardship in a way that we lead the nation in, we lead the world in. And this is something that the general public has kind of forgotten. Is like, how did we get here? Texas once fed a nation, and we once ate the best food on the planet. But what we've surrendered is that market access, and that market access was surrendered through the processing centers, and that's what Bolton basically just showed the world that he could do as a USDA processing center here in the state of Texas. And so where is the bottleneck of our food supply? It's at the processing center and the regulatory capture that has happened within the processing.
Clint, why are you poisoning people with raw milk?
Because it tastes delicious.
Well, I mean, more seriously, I've covered this. I've spoken to Amos Miller. I don't know if you know who he is. He's the farmer in Pennsylvania who had a seeds. And I've had some conversations with Mr. Massey about this. And his worry to me is that the CDC is going to constantly come up with media that you can't compete with, that will say raw milk has caused X. They'll cite very little evidence, but do you find, I guess this is a two-part question. Like, one of them is, do you find that it's a do you find like a political middle ground that all the spectrums are kind of gathering around raw milk? Like, it isn't the normal, my theory is that it's not a normal left-right issue. It's not just like granola moms or it's like everybody, it seems to be a critical mass of people, but it's facing industry. How do you overcome that? Like, how do you overcome them saying the next swine flu was the result of your raw cows, and then things get seized? Like, how do we preserve you?
So I always look at it, because back in COVID broke a lot of people, and we lost a lot of people, and they're still here today. And you kind of got to just ignore those individuals, because you're never going to change their mind. You're never going to re-educate those individuals. So you got to re-educate the individuals that aren't paying attention, the people that aren't glued into those news networks that are propagating this disinformation regarding raw milk, because there are a lot of studies out there that show the healing factor with it. And they give you the scare of like E. coli or Listeria, but the amount of people that have actually died from raw milk over the last 25 years is less than bacon. And we've just had this big last outbreak of Listeria with the pork company that they actually ended up shutting down the facility, because I believe it was like 13 deaths spread across the nation. So it's really just about educating people and just showing the results for what they are, and just kind of ignoring the mainstream media, because it is a dying industry that we're seeing more and more people kind of gravitate away from it because of when COVID broke people and they got into the Trump derangement syndrome and kept on regurgitating all the same information.
Have you both experienced it as well, where, I mean, you're obviously giving people heart attacks with your steaks, and you're killing the environment because you're changing the thermostat of the earth? This is an information war, though. Am I right? Like, the fight is for the narrative.
Yes.
And you're starting. I know you're starting that. I saw that video. It's great, but how do we reach a critical mass of people to turn this around, or is it really more like one by one we need to convert?
It's going to be a one by one, in my opinion. Building your local communities and growing outwards versus trying to tackle it at a national level.
I'm going to have to agree with him. You know, when COVID hit, we were really, really ramping up our company. And for years, you know, I've let people come to the ranch and pick up meat, and then, you know, we would show them the facility. But I got so gun shy because when we opened our facility in Luling, I had the CDPD call because PETA was ready to do a massive march. I've had vegans attack us through social media, and I'm a murderer, a slaughterer. I've kind of dealt with all of it. I've had people, when we had cattle get loose in Tesla, stop on the side of the road to video record us and then turn around and put us in the newspaper for chasing animals and hurting their respiratory environment and you name it. I mean, I can't make a lot of this shit up, but it really happened. You know, I agree with Clinton. I think a lot of it is a one-by-one, but it starts with communities. And for communities to come together and show an importance and understanding of knowing where the food comes from, understanding the monetary system, it all interlinks with each other. Because we can get on the broad media today, no different than you can take Trump and Kamala. You're going to have people die hard on both sides. They're going to agree to disagree, and you're still not going to accomplish a damn thing because all they do is fight. So you're better off infiltrating people that are progressive in their mental capacity. They can think and think for themselves and not what someone tells them to think. And then hopefully they can penetrate their friends that aren't so smart. Sorry, that was a little crazy.
It's spot on. It's daunting because when we had our first conference, we had Dr. Mary Kerr. She's out of Dallas. And she takes care of children, and she interviews the parents. And so if their parents are kind of got a brain fog going on, she makes them do a 48-hour bone broth fast to where she will treat the child after the parents have got their shit together, basically. And that's her protocol. And so, as Cole said and as Clint said, you know, I've gone out there. I'm serious. I've been to Asia. I've been to Australia. Everything. Everybody's kind of getting a general consensus. This is a global industrial shift that's going on. It's a monetary reset in a lot of ways. We see that. There's also a food shift. And so the general awareness, you got to talk to those people that have their ears to hear right now. But because of that fact, if you get around that many like-minded people, you're going to have a movement. 4 years ago, I started the Beef Initiative in the Bitcoin space because the network is probably one of the most robust and widespread networks in the world. Think about it. I mean, I've traveled the world because of Bitcoin, and it's allowed me to meet so many people that are like-minded, and Bitcoin people are basically, you know, don't trust. You got to verify, right? Okay, let's go. Let's look at this ledger. Let's look at truth, authenticity. You know, who are you hanging out with? And once you start that type of movement within your own community, as Cole said, it really, I think there's a wave of people that's about to jump on board, especially with all the suffering that's about to come our way.
That's really great to hear. I have one more question that I'd like to I think people probably have a lot more interesting questions than I have. I want to also thank each and every, all of you really, for like persisting and spreading the word, because I drink raw milk, Sierra Vista, Wilcox Farms, and I have a local rancher. The question that I get asked a lot, and I want to throw it at you, is why are so many people interested in Bitcoin who are interested in carnivory and raw milk? Do any of you have thoughts on this?
When the government tells you it's bad, you got to have more of it.
Seyfedina Moose told me when I asked him this, and he said, very, like, I'm an idiot. He's like, it's the natural state of human existence. People have always hunted for the biggest ruminant animal they could find, and always sought hard currency. The question should be, why are people Keynesians and eating tofu? That's weird. Right. This is natural, and I dig that. Could we open it up? Could we do that thing?
Yeah. Actually, I have one question to add on before we open up there. I'll take that. Hey, thanks. So I'm going to jump in with my own selfish question. Because Clint, I think, Cole, you come from a ranching family, right?
Yep.
Clint, you actually recently left the city
to start to become a farmer.
Correct.
A little more than a year into it.
So yeah, I'll be going on 13, 14 months now.
And I found you, speaking of an InfoWar, I found you on InfoWars right around the time I was thinking I needed to get some raw milk, and especially because they were telling us how terrible it was. So that was my confirmation that it's a good thing. And so I think you're part of a wave of hopefully younger people that are going to take a step into this industry that is challenging, like Cole said, and is driving so many people out of it. But also, I believe there's a younger generation that see the opportunity and just see the necessity of this. Like, we've got to decentralize food production. It's gotten too centralized. And just like Bitcoin, we got to build more of these meat nodes like Cole built, and the way that Cole did it, getting USDA was crucial, but also now you have this awesome facility that you can do a herd share program with. So maybe someday, if the market is sufficient, tell me if I'm wrong, Cole, but maybe you just tell that USDA, thanks, but no thanks, we don't need your stamp anymore. I'm kind of rambling here, but what got you into farming? How's it been going? Now, I know you guys were at capacity with your farm share. So it's a chicken and egg thing, right? We need more people to see your example. I just went all over the place there, but I'm excited to have you guys here. So maybe talk about your journey into farming, and then we'll turn it over and I'll stop rambling.
I'm basically a jack of all trades. Come from a military family, serving all the way back to World War I. I was in Afghanistan, my brother was in Iraq. After that, I worked for the Department of Defense, figured out where I was going to be in 20 years, didn't want to do that. So I went to school for cybersecurity network software at ITT Tech, graduated, bachelor's, ended up in the solar industry after that. Did that for 6 years, ran my own company out here in Austin for 2 years. And then COVID hit. And with the draconian lockdowns, they basically destroyed my business. And I was very apolitical at that time, didn't care about politics, never really voted. And it kind of opened up my eyes what was kind of going on and all the corruption. So I actually got political and actually ran for city council out here in Austin in 2022. But after losing to an open socialist that said that she wanted to burn the city down to the ground and start over, we decided that we've seen this happen before in California, and we knew exactly where Austin was going. So we decided if we can't change anything politically, then we're going to change how we eat and how we provide food to our local community. Because if you wouldn't believe it, I actually used to weigh almost 280 pounds. And I got on the carnivore diet after about 2021 and dropped 100 pounds down to 180. And then from there, started learning about raw milk after we got our first cow and got hooked. It wasn't even going to be the main product that we were going to sell. We were actually following Joel Salatin's rotational grazing methodology on doing pastured poultry, and that was going to be our main business. But with my military injuries, after doing our first culling, I was like hunched over for about 2-3 days and couldn't walk, which transitioned us into doing a micro raw dairy and just learning all the benefits and the healing factors with raw milk. My wife, she had eczema, no longer has eczema, had severe asthma and allergy problems. That's gone. Had some ups and downs, mental issues because of medication that the doctors had her on. We got her off those. She's full and clear and now perfectly living a healthy life. Just an animal based. It started out carnivore, but now it's 100% animal based with lots of raw milk.
All right, we're going to take questions. I'm going to give my quick answer to Matthew's question on why this crossover between Bitcoin and carnivory. And my view of that is that once you start to see Bitcoin as money and you start to see all the lies of the fiat system, you start to question everything. And that allows you to then question, well, if everyone's saying this is bad, but if I try it out for 10 days, if I'm willing to test out Bitcoin as my money, then I'm willing to question assumptions, not take what the propaganda engine is telling us and think for ourselves. And then the incentives of sound money. It's like, and Safe talks a lot about this in the book, and if you haven't read the Bitcoin Standard, this concept of time preference. Once you start to have sound money, it allows you to start to value the future more, and so you actually want to be healthier. And so as people want to be healthier, they start seeking out answers because they know that they're starting from a baseline of not being healthy. And they're looking out there and saying, and more motivated to find, people like Cole and Slim and Clint. So with that, questions?
So this group, kind of keeping with the theme, is obviously like a Bitcoin interest group, which has nothing really to do with meat except for a kind of abstracted level of overlap. Are there other groups other than Bitcoin that you guys have found that also have no, like, I guess, I don't know, obvious overlap with interest in locally produced meat and raw milk and all this stuff, but there is a sort of base level ideological alignment where the group gets really into this?
What I've seen, you know, especially in the United States, you know, we have our farmers markets and everything, and we have this homesteader type of mentality that's really taken over. And so you have a generational shift that I'm seeing. But as far as a true community that is as intentional and as far as directional with, you know, like Parker said, low time preference and, you know, the why behind everything, I haven't seen anybody like the Bitcoin crowd, because, you know, you look at Bitcoin crowd, and to kind of lead off what Parker said, you know, I'm good friends with Adam Curry, so is Cole now, but, you know, what is the value of what's being exchanged here? And when you look at food, the most valuable food on the planet is beef. I mean, if you look at how the highly processed system that we have to consume from, what's going to be the most valuable? So the most valuable form of money now is Bitcoin. And so I think it naturally just goes in that holistic way of, you know, what is value, right?
Yep.
First off, thank y'all for what y'all do. I tried the 10-day approach. I don't know where he went. And I switched my IBS and gained 30 pounds in the gym. So thank y'all for all that y'all do. The question I have is, how do I support local ranchers in my day-to-day? Like, my fiance and I have a freezer on our wedding registry, and we're going to buy half a cow, but that kind of seems like it stops there, and we can only eat so much. Like, how do we get our friends and family to support, or are there other avenues of expenses other than buying that shirt, which I intend on doing? But are there other ways that we can support the ranching community so that can be a more sustainable, almost like career choice for people in our generation?
Sure. Well, I think one, if you're a good cook, cook for friends and family, because they're going to be more prone to do it. If you suck, call Johnny. He'll take care of it. I wish he were still here. I love to make fun of him. But no, I think more importantly is you know, spreading the messaging to friends and family, and using your own experience as a testimony, how your body feels about going carnivore. Or, you know, when you eat a 6-ounce filet mignon and you're full, when you're used to eating a 22-ounce ribeye at a restaurant, completely different program when you're eating dry aged beef or what have you. But really, it truly is helping us get connected with those consumers, and that's kind of the direction where I'm fixing to head with my next venture, is making sure I really, you know, we made a tagline when we opened Hometown Meat Market. We wanted it to be a place where both ranchers and consumers meet, MEAT exclamation. But really, we want to be able to connect those dots and connect those relationships, because with time it'll exponentially grow. Or kind of like they were saying a while ago with Clinton, you know, at some point a lot of these small ranches and small producers or dairies, we're going to reach capacity. So it's a great opportunity for me. I refer people all the time to tons of ranchers that we process for. There's so much market space out there. We will never compete. And there's not competition, because we have millions and millions and millions of people that could potentially buy from us, and there's no way in which we would compete with one another.
And that's a good point that Cole brings. You know, we talk about scarcity and abundance in Bitcoin. And, you know, one thing that we have is right now we have an abundance of choice to go out and shake a rancher's hand. You look at that video, we've lost 140,000 ranchers and farmers in 5 years. Last year was 27,000. I think it's 17,000 right now. and you ask, how can we get the community involved? This is a lifestyle. This is a culture. We have to get back to being proud of that. There's a lot of things that facilitates raising a cow. And, if you can get people talking about that, the #1 TV show is Yellowstone, right? And so let's turn pop culture a little bit on its head. I mean, does everybody remember in the 90s, and, we're talking about the 90s earlier, but, we have something in the cattle industry called the beef checkoff mark, okay? It's beef. It's what's for dinner. That was Sam Elliott, right? That was a beef checkoff mark. We had to pay money into each cow. They created a marketing plan for us, and it was a pretty good marketing plan. Well, they've dropped the ball, and so you look about what we're up against as far as getting awareness out there to the general public. It's up to you guys, and that's why I did the beef initiative, is because it's basically the center of the Dow. You can get there. There's an entry point. I mean, we've partnered up with Crowd Health. There's something there for everybody right now, because I told everybody 4 years ago, this is a Great American Health Initiative being led by the Great American Rancher. Now that people are understanding that beef is not going to kill you, that it's probably the best food on the planet, and then, just kind of ride that algorithm of conversation, and it's about education. Educate, educate, educate.
Yeah, and Cole shared a statistic when we had a local business event here in January, where he mentioned that 10% of his sales were in Bitcoin, but 30% of his sales came from people that he met through the Bitcoin network. And, as Slim says, changing your consumption model is important. It's also hard, but just staying on all your friends. Every time we do an event here, and Johnny's back there, I say, I remind people to go do it, because each time it might be 1 or 2 more people, right? It's not going to be everyone all at once, and you got to just keep hitting them over and over and over with that same message and driving them to businesses like this, that it's not just you, it's your whole network and sphere of influence. Topher?
So you talked a bit about, of course, perverse subsidies, overreaching government regulation. A lot of this stuff happens on the federal level. Do you see any value in working with government on a more local level? And can you touch on that?
I've got a good story. Cole's probably got the best experience that's recent, in how to approach this and the perspective, because, we look at social media and it's, anti-Fed, anti-regulations and everything. But Cole's got a wonderful experience that I think is very valuable. And it kind of matches up to what we've experienced up in the Texas Panhandle.
Well, right now, yes, I don't enjoy being a Fed facility. It sucks. They have a lot of overbearing rules that, quite frankly, are really stupid. They're more concerned with me triple washing a knife that we've already ran through. If any of y'all know about sterilizing food equipment, you can douse in 180-degree temperature water with denaturant and have it immediately sanitized. But they'll write you up for all kinds of random crap. Where it was a little different for me, when I first opened, I did fight. And I had no problem throwing an absolute fit, because the small guys don't get paid attention to. And I try really, really hard to use better words and not foul language. But I also learned this too, even with distributors, right? They're used to catering to the big USDA facilities. So you're always, as a small plant, at the bottom of the list. They're not going to come out and fix your equipment when it breaks. They don't really care. Sometimes you got to be the big dog in the room. So I got fortunate enough. I threw a big enough fit a few times to where I questioned every single thing that they wanted to question us over. Well, they're not used to that. They're used to corporate companies complying and saying, yes, sir, no, sir, we'll fix it. And I just asked why. Well, after doing it enough, they realized they didn't always have an answer for why. So they went to put a listing out. The problem is they listed it 3 times and nobody wanted to come to our plant immediately because of me. That was a little bit intentional, because what we did is we had 3 inspectors, the same 3 all applied, they were local. And I knew if we could get someone local, they are going to want a job local. So when they want to give us a lot of trouble, I just remind them, that's fine, we'll shut the doors, go bankrupt, you won't have a job, then you're going to be searching again, working for Cargill or Monsanto. Isn't that going to be fun? Let's send you back to that chicken house. And we have been very blessed. We got a great permanent inspector. I can't tell you necessarily her views on life, but we know each other well enough that we can have a conversation that's logical. Hey, we don't like this, or I noticed this. How are you going to correct it? I agree. We messed up. Give it, write us up, and we'll get through that. We've been fortunate. We have a regional guy that actually makes sense. He really cares for small processors. He understands the big guys are the ones everyone caters to. So when we have disagreements, he's fair, but he treats us all the same. And if we could all just have a level playing field, I don't care whether you're fed, state, independent, it wouldn't matter. Problem is with government, it's never going to be a level playing field. So sometimes you got to use a little bit of Southern charm to get through it, and sometimes you just got to be an asshole.
Question.
That real quick on that, because we look at the digital algorithm of anti-government, but up in the Texas Panhandle, they failed the inspection, the first inspection. And so that's a state inspected. It wasn't even a Fed. And so the second inspection, everybody had cameras on every inspector. They had 4 inspectors there. And so at that point in time, it got inspected, and it's been basically a model for a state-run, not a USDA, but state-run microprocessing center. And as Cole says, the local people are the best to work with. And so they want you to be successful. They don't want you to fail. And so if we can bring that understanding, because there's so much chatter on social media, but there's a lot of good people out there that are working in some of these industries that are these 3-letter and 4-letter industries, but they're actually on our side. And we have to always remember that.
Questions? Yep.
Have you, this is something that I'm interested in personally, but have you guys thought about setting up mentoring programs for people who are interested in learning to ranch? Second part of that question is, if we get a Bitcoin bull run and there are Bitcoiners with money burning holes in their pockets, sort of like connecting that with ranchers with experience and wisdom who might like the funding from somebody who shares a lot of priorities. Curious your thoughts.
It's good questions, because we have the internet now, and one thing that we do have is YouTube, and there's a lot of people that have educated. There's an ex-football player that he was an all-pro, and he got tired of being an all-pro, and he learned how to be a farmer on YouTube. And so I'm telling you, Joe Salatin is probably your best entry point. Get that base layer of understanding. What is food? What is soil? What have we lost? I mean, food is biology. It's not science. And as far as mentoring, there's all kinds of different. We have Working Ranch Cowboy Association. You have all kinds of different mentoring programs. But I really, point to Jason Rick. He's the 3rd rancher that came in the beef initiative. He's first generational. And he says he learned by observational science. He basically learned to, pay attention to nature. And so there's so many different entry points, but we've talked about definitely, because we have the foundation, the I Am Texas Slim Foundation, and Cole came up through FFA. We've got other people that came up in those programs. And so within the foundation, we are going to create some mentoring that'll be scholarship driven, it'll be grant driven, and we're working on that right now as far as talking to which generation. Jason didn't start ranching until he was in his 30s. And so we have a lot of new generation that's coming up that we're kind of targeting, that we can really focus on the regenerative side, because a lot of times they're targeted with the institutional way of basically, taking care of the land, and that's what we've kind of screwed up. That's the Monsanto curriculum that we don't want the younger generation to fall into.
The other part to your question, you were asking about funding. Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways in which it can be launched. One of the things we've been talking about doing, and you'll hear about it on social media, people talk about herd shares, but we're wanting to take it to another level to where if a person wanted to invest their money in their food, we're going to be able to allow them to basically buy in from the day a calf is conceived, and be able to come out to the ranch to experience the life, the growth, the finishing, the whole process of that calf, you know, as time permits and you have time, you want to come look, all the way to the processing plant, to where you go in, you have that connection with your butcher, you get to go through the complete process of fabrication, to picking it up, to being able to go home and take that whole experience from start to finish. I think that's going to be really good for a lot of people, hopefully empowering, so that people can really understand the labor and the length of time it takes to do it. But with time, it takes a lot of capital. So yes, we will be announcing different ways in which that could be launched.
I know right now we're actually mentoring one of our customers, part of our farm share program, to start their own micro dairy in their town. They're about an hour and a half drive from us. And so we always encourage a lot of our customers that are further drives, if they have land, if they're interested in starting their own micro dairy, we'll actually teach them on how to set the whole process, launch their website, where to start pulling from for local customers first. Because right now we drive an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours twice a week for about 80% of our members that are down here in the Austin area. Only 20% of our customers are actually local.
All right, I'm going to end with one question that I want to hear from all of you on. The theme of the night is why inflation destroyed health and how Bitcoin fixes it. In each of your words, could you just describe that latter part, how Bitcoin fixes it? And to be more tangible, I could say either talk about how you've leveraged Bitcoin in advancing what each of you are doing on an individual level in terms of the Beef Initiative, KNC Cattle, FAFO Farms, or if you want to speak to a broader level in terms of a system, one of those. But if you want to kind of go to each one of you guys.
The first question was exactly
Just how Bitcoin fixes it, and you can talk about that in terms of how you've actually leveraged it through the Beef Initiative or at a broader level, either or.
The first question I ask producers is, where's the value of the cow right now in 2024? Where's the value of the cow, everybody? Nobody can really say.
Ribeye.
In the ribeye, in the tomahawk. There's only 14 or 16 ribeyes in a cow. Anyways, where is the value of the cow? Well, it's in the USDA insurance policy. What is that? That's debt. That's fiat. So how do you basically, talk about Bitcoin? Well, going into Bitcoin, where's the use case and the utility of Bitcoin for a rancher? Well, one of the first places we saw, because we went into e-commerce, because we wanted to do peer-to-peer transactions with beef, and definitely during COVID. So 3.5% credit card fees. And Justin Trammell up in the Texas Panhandle had to pay $40,000 in credit card fees his last year. Okay, if he's doing that in Bitcoin, he doesn't have to pay fucking $40,000, and he gets to basically put it into Bitcoin. And so if you think about that, and I can't speak to, because there's this guy next to me, he's got the story about his journey into Bitcoin and what he did with it. But who are you, the individual? And for me, basically, Bitcoin allowed me to speak to a new cattle industry, to where I can give a different perspective of where is the value of the cow, because that matters right now. And it basically leads into something that is educational. And it basically is a two-sided street conversation after that.
I want to say real quickly, as a rancher, we store our value, sadly, normally in equity. So if you talk to most farmers, most ranchers, their equipment's beat to crap, and when it's time to retire, they better hope their land's worth the value. So what I did, 3 years ago, y'all got me into Bitcoin. It's really hard, and I say that jokingly. I've been in the commercial banking sector my whole life. So if you don't think I'm not a target, I started doing some loans and helping folks open bank accounts when they have to do fiat transactions that are Bitcoiners. And I can tell you, my board looked at me really, really weird. Funny now, they look a little different because of this story. I decided to start selling beef for Bitcoin. I got my first whole coin. I was really, really excited. I put it up. I found an opportunity to buy some heifers that were pretty intriguing. They were pretty cheap at the time. So I took a whole Bitcoin, bought 20 heifers. Turned around, sold them a year and a half later, had 2 whole coins, put it back up, replicated it again, and I've been able to build my cache of Bitcoin simply by selling cattle and storing value in my ranch, no longer just in the dirt that I have or the beat up, worn out equipment. I have something that I can carry on multi-generational, and I don't have to carry with it a bunch of burdensome land tax that goes behind it.
Clint?
New store value of the cow.
So I'm fresh to Bitcoin. We actually had our first Bitcoin transaction from our farm share about 6-7 months ago. Alex Stranger with a Petty Gap, he actually helped us set up our Bitcoin wallet for FAFO.
I've been on his podcast.
I was on his podcast too when he ran for city council. But yeah, great guy. Informed me about the Bitcoin community out here and connected me with Pled Labs, and kind of just been sharing the history of our journey on this new farming industry.
Great. Well, let's give these guys all a round of applause. And, support them in any way you can. Go to thebeefinitiative.com. Cole and KNC Cattle, Hometown Meats, buy your meat through Hometown Meat Market. Is it kncattle.com still, or is it?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then find out FAFO Farms. Does it?
It's FAFOFarmsTX.com.
Okay, FAFOFarmsTX.com. Does FAFO stand for anything?
Fuck around and find out.
Fuck around and find out. You tell people you buy raw milk from Fuck Around and Find Out Farms, okay? They will want that. They will want that, I promise you. So, and then I want to thank Matthew for coming and speaking. Second time I heard him speak, it was just as good, if not better than the second time. And I've had my brother read the book. He's sitting right behind you. Started eating that way, feeling better. So the work you're doing is really important. Wish you good luck when you go on to Tucker, knock 'em dead. Everybody buy his book. Honestly, if you already have the book, buy it for your family. Do it. There's like 18 books we better sell out. So go get your books. And Sean, thank you for organizing this. Phenomenal. Really appreciate it. Come back soon.